I mean, we had Silicon Valley Bank. We just closed our Series A. I think we had 12 million pounds in the bank, and Silicon Valley Bank collapsed. And we caught up our investors, and it was pretty clear that they couldn't do anything. Like, they didn't have just cash lying around. You know, the idea that your entire work could just go poof overnight for something out of your control is pretty devastating. I remember though, one night, I just said, look, we've done everything we can. Let's just have a great dinner. Control the things you can control and let the score take care of itself.
Tim, at Yonder, you're disrupting a huge market, and you're going up against competitors that are worth literally billions of dollars. But only in a few years, you have been able to get tens of thousands of customers. So I'm wondering, like, what is the most important decision that you made early on as a founder to disrupt this industry?
I think it sounds a little bit cliche. I think the thing that I think a lot about is picking a problem or like a space that you're willing to invest a lot of time in for a long period of time, which sounds like super classic, like cliche. And I kind of like cringe saying it a little bit. But I think that one of the things that I found, even in our early journey, was that, well, when I started Yonder, it was like, you know, a crazy fintech period. Like, you know, there's a lot of venture capital funding for fintech, kind of similar to AI as it is today. And a lot of what I would describe as like a lot of fintech tourists, both on the founder side and the investor side as well. So people who are like, I like this industry because it's hot now. And I kind of think similar to AI as well, where it's like people like it because it's a hot industry rather than necessarily like really like the industry. And I think like with anything in life, there will be seasons where it is, you know, flourishing. You know, like imagine London in summer versus winter when everyone's like hunkering down.
Yeah.
And I think that is not unique to the climate in London, but actually consistent for any sort of startup you build in sort of ups and downs. And so I think like part of, I guess, well, what's allowed us to get to where we are so far is this real sense of like genuinely wanting to keep doing this for a long period of time, wanting to really build a product that we're really proud of. To an extent, I think that's helped us get through some of the ups and downs of the market. And to an extent, like we're one of the few consumer fintechs that are still around that started in 2021. A lot of the ones that are really successful now started much earlier. So, you know, the likes of Monzo really started around 2015, but around the 2021 sort of vintage, there aren't a ton, to be honest. And part of it was like, we just kept going and we were able to, you know, fortunately raise capital. We were able to, you know, grow the business. But I think that when there are periods of times where the market kind of changed direction, you know, we had a team that just like wanted to be there and build a great product. And that was really good because people were like, oh, are you worried about the market sentiment and how your team will feel about it? I'm like, honestly, my team didn't care about it. Like, the team really just care about building a product they love and, you know, being proud of the work they do. So I think that's helped. And I think about, whilst we're not building an AI company, but when I kind of speak to a couple of the folks from my team have left to start companies as well. And we're fortunate to have about 4 to 5 people leave our company to become founders themselves and go through the venture journey as well. And one of the things I sort of encourage them to do is really just to think about the fact that this isn't a 2-3 year journey. It's a 10 to 15 year journey at minimum. You know, we often forget that first couple of years they're fun because it's a little bit novel. 5 years in, it is a grind. Like there is like a sense of grind in the sense of like, if you don't like what you do or you're not really proud of the product, I think it gets really hard to get out of bed long term.
And at the very beginning, you mentioned the problem that you're passionate to solve, because when you look at those major players like American Express, Visa, Mastercard, there was something that you saw which was fundamentally broken. What was it that you saw that others didn't?
One of the things that I found really fascinating was that, you know, I when I kind of sort of moved into the fintech space, it was a real like focus, and this is where a whole bunch of like the neobanks are built. I mean, I guess I describe it as like cheaper, faster, more convenient, which I think is great. Like they've built multi-billion-dollar businesses off the back of that.
Yeah.
I was more interested in the idea of, you know, at the end of the day, money itself isn't that interesting. It's like what you do with it, and what if we could connect that with how you discover a city and how you explore a city. And we had this saying, Henry and I spoke about this a long time ago, which is like, how do we make everyone feel like a tourist in their own city? And how do we make everyone feel like a local whenever they travel? And no one had really sort of connected money in that sort of thesis ever. It was always like very much like, you've got your like travel and like the secret Londons of the world that are like discovery and things like that. And then you have your sort of like your neobanks, but no one had really sort of bridged the gap. I'll say like American Express had done that sort of in the 70s and 80s. And actually the first ever card product, most people don't realize, was called Diners Club. Literally, it's in the name, Diners Club. It was actually a restaurant club. That's how it started in the 1950s. And so I always kind of had I don't know, it's something that I would like as well. I love exploring new cities. was a problem that I wanted to solve for myself. But also I think, as someone who'd moved to London, and it was like an exciting time, I was like, could we be like that local friend that you had to show you the city? And how can we start to like connect that with how you spend your money day to day, and then
Yeah.
connect that with the city that you go into and explore as well? And no one had really played that concept, to be honest. And maybe part of it because I came from a background actually in media, so I didn't actually work in financial services before this. I actually worked in media before this, and like with media, a lot of it is like if you kind of think about the effective value of like watching Netflix is actually like pretty nil. Like it doesn't actually do anything for you. People often say to me like, "Yeah," so like the classic advice is, build a painkiller, not a vitamin. I'm like, what? Like painkiller is Netflix really solving? It's not. It's like pure vitamin. It's pure enjoyment. But I think like with consumer products, which is what I love doing, there's something about like the sense of like doing something that's fun and enjoyable. And I sort of wanted to make a consumer fintech product that felt like that. That felt really emotionally led. That felt very rich with photography. That felt kind of like cycling down Regent Street. And when you have these like beautiful shops and you kind of you cycle through and you see all of those, that feeling that you get, I wanted that feeling with our product as well.
Yeah.
And it's a very weird thing to describe, but I literally met the general partner at a very large venture fund. He said to me, this is kind of weird. I've never heard something like this before. And, I've literally heard basically thousands of variations of every single company that could be pitched. And basically, every time someone pitches me a company, I've almost always heard someone do that before. This is one of the first times I've heard someone do this. And it was like, oh, this is interesting. Doesn't mean he's going to invest, but I think it was kind of interesting to hear that.
And was this also your approach to carve like a small percentage of the users out? Because I'm like, if you look at the industry before you got started, like you have those major players. So I'm wondering, like, what was your approach to get those small percentage of the very first users? Was it to be different and like very new?
This is like an infuriating thing that VCs always say is like, you need a big TAM, right? So like, and everyone gets a pitch, it's like, you need a big TAM. The problem is that trying to break into a big market is pretty much impossible. So let's say, I don't know, you guys are working on like ERP and it's like, yeah, big TAM. Oh, let's go after like Salesforce.com. It's like, yeah, like what's your beachhead in that market? Because going head to head doesn't really work. And so I really like that framing of like, what's the beachhead market? And the beachhead market is to be really narrow and needs to be a sort of a segment that you can go really deep on that is too small that a large company would ignore. And I think that's kind of like the interesting paradox. It needs to be large enough that you can kind of land and expand, but small enough that is uninteresting. Because if it's interesting, then everyone else would do it. And so like, I always think about it, it's interesting that Zoom exists. Video conferencing is not a new thing.
Yeah.
Like Google Meets and a bunch of other platforms that exist there. But Eric was like really focused on like doing this really narrow thing really, really, really well. And was able to build a billion dollars of business off the back of that. And so we kind of we sort of picked when we started like foodies in London, very much like the short attack me by people. And that was just like a segment that we knew we could deliver a credible experience for, that we felt a lot of excitement about. Now we're much bigger than that now, but we sort of felt like we had to pick a beachhead that we could go after.
Yeah.
And then obviously the next question then is like, how do you expand? But I would rather have a small number of customers who love the product that we then have to expand TAM for, than the counterfactor would just have a massive TAM but not have any customers like the product.
Because you mentioned Zoom, like, do you think the strategy is also applicable to other industries, like that you need to go like very niche? Or what would you say to a founder that is building in an industry where you have those large players? Like, what's the approach that you would suggest?
I think no matter what, you need to find a beachhead somewhere. I think like a universal truth is that there needs to be a small enough segment of customer that you can wrap your hand around, at least to get started. Now, how that evolves, that looks different.
Yeah.
But to get started, you kind of need to find like a beachhead market. And I remember talking to Grant from Gamma, and Gamma is obviously, being publicized as doing really well, like 100 million run rate. I was actually a user interview participant in 2021. And I remember he was initially looking at going after consultants, like management consultants. And that was what my background was. And so he's sort of pitching this thing. I think he sort of pivoted a little bit. I don't know for sure, but it sounds like he's doing a lot more with like teachers and educators now as well. But he was very much like trying to find a specific use case where essentially creating presentations from scratch really easy could really work. Now, like PowerPoint's used by pretty much every single company in the world. Now, if you go after like every company in the world, every industry, it's like pretty hard to like crack that. And so you kind of have to find like a beachhead where For all the people who use PowerPoint, there's like a segment that you think you could do a really good job for and do that really well. If you want to try and build a platform for like all companies in the world in the first year, it's like pretty hard. And I think it's very unlikely you better like find product market fit for that.
And then, Tim, if we go back to the time before Yonder, so to early 2020, you were based in London at the time, and your girlfriend moved to London as well after you had a long distance relationship. But then she loses her job. And also at this point in time, many of your friends moved back to Australia, actually. I want to speak about this moment in time because I think it would have been an easy decision for you to go back as well. Like, why didn't you?
Yes, it was a very depressing year. So a bit of context in 2020, my wife had just moved. So we just got married. She just moved over. We were doing long distance for 2 years. She had no friends. She just got a job. She got let go in the middle of COVID. We were in a 45 square meter apartment with no friends, no family. And Australia, by the way, had no lockdown. So Australia had like complete freedom. All our friends were going out, going for dinner.
It was the paradise.
Yeah, and like we would call them and they're like, "How's it going in London?" We're like, "Oh, we can't do anything." And my wife is unemployed. And I was at a scale up that was really having a tough time during COVID as well. And we were having to, cut down the business that I was at. So not only was like the startup I was at not doing that well, my wife was also made redundant. So she had no job for 9 months. And I also said to her, "Hey, I want to work in the startup," which is like, "Are you serious? Like, we just got married. Like, why now?" And I was like, "Well, like I have this itch and I've been thinking about this for a while." I think like a bit of it was, I think there were two elements. I think one, I did really want to see this through. I don't know. I had a lot of excitement about what we wanted to build. I think like on a deeply like personal, like spiritual level, I kind of had this little sense of like conviction. I have like a personal faith, and there's this sense of like, this is what you're meant to do. And it just kind of felt this sense of, this is what you're meant to do. And my wife said to me, she goes, "Look, if you want to go and stay and commit to this, let's go and make a choice to do it." Because a lot of our friends would say, "Hey, are you guys planning to move back this year?" And we'd always be like, "Oh, I don't know. Like, depends if this startup goes anywhere," type of thing. And she was like, "Look, if we're going to stay, we should just stay and commit." And so in 2020, middle of the year, we're like, we're going to stay and commit and we're going to see this through. And, the rest is history. We did manage to end up raising our pre-seed round sort of end of 2020.
Yeah.
And, it's been a huge roller coaster since.
No, I think it's super impressive, like the thought process and that you make that decision. But I'm wondering also when like everything is like against it, basically, I was wondering if there has been a specific experience for you that showed you that entrepreneurship is like exactly what you want to do, and if there has been that it can be like a force for positive change as well.
I love just walking to the office and seeing my team. We're not huge, we're 60 people, but the fact that we've managed to like bring together a whole heap of like incredibly talented people who came from companies like Wise, Monzo, Resi, Bain, like just from all these walks of life and come together and be proud of their work. I think that's like super fulfilling. Like, I don't know, there was something fulfilling about, as a founder, people joining you on this like crazy merry journey of building something from scratch. And every so often I have to kind of like take a step back and be like, we built this. Like, this was an idea and we built this and this is incredible. I think the second thing is to see people go out and start their own things as well. And we've had a couple of people go out from Yonder and start companies as well. So Henry went off to start Fruitful and raise venture backing. James went off to start Artificial Societies and also raised from some great funds as well. And I take it a great privilege to be part of their journey, going into that journey of starting companies as well. And I hope we can do more of that as well. And I think thirdly is just seeing customers love your product. Like that is, every so often when I've had like a bad week, which happens very often, is I'll go to like a Trust Pilot and be like, these are like people who like bothered to write something positive about our company. That's cool. Like that is such a great privilege to be able to build something that people want to use. Very so occasionally someone will come up to me like, "Oh, hey, like, I don't really talk about my job outside of work too much." So people are like, "Oh, what do you do?" I'm like, "Oh, yeah, like I run a startup. I work in a tech company." I don't even say I'm a fan now. I usually say, "Yeah, like I work at a tech company." And they're like, "Oh, what is it?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's this company called Yonder." And they're like, "Oh, I love that product. It's so good. I loved it."
Cool.
And so that's kind of like really, really fulfilling to see that. So I think as my background was in product, and the proudest thing for me to do is to build a product that people love. Like that is like, if I was to define what makes me happier to do great work, is to build a product people love. And so seeing that is always a massive high.
Is this also how you would describe the mission that you're on? Because even with like everything you said, like why did you choose fintech as the industry to actually execute on this?
So I have this really lofty ambition. And in 2016, I lived in Kenya and I worked with the founders of a payment platform called M-Pesa. And for those who don't know, M-Pesa is basically a mobile money platform. It was built in around late, 2006, 2007, I think. To give you a sense of scale, about 50% of the GDP goes to this payment rails. Like that is an insane level of like payment flow. And what I think was really cool was to see what that did for the nation. And so I would go out to villages. I was working on an international aid assignment, and I'll go out to little villages in the middle of nowhere, and they'll be like, "Oh, I love M-Pesa. Like, I send money back to my family.
Mm.
I like use it to keep my money safe. I use it to trade. I buy stuff like I use it for like commerce." And I think this is something that really cool about. Hey, if you actually make money work really well, it literally powers the entire economy, which is like a slightly profound thought, but every single person in this room, every single person who hears this podcast will have interacted with money for that day.
Yeah.
For sure, guaranteed. And so like like to build something that touches that basically means you touch every part of someone's life. And that is incredible privilege. And I think there's this ambition I have, which is I think when you do this when you do money well, I think you can like lift the entire level of an economy and an entire nation. Uh, and I say that like because I saw it. Like I looked at and I spent a lot of time in East Africa and I spent a lot of time in different parts of East Africa. And I would say like obviously payments wasn't the only thing that made this
Yeah.
work, but it was definitely a massive enabler, right? Like with payments, you can do commerce, you can do trade, you can keep money safe, you can invest. There's like a whole bunch of good stuff that happens with payments and the flow of money. And so I don't know, I had a deep belief that you could build a valuable business and also like lift the standard for like millions of people in the world. And
Yeah.
so that was always the ultimate goal, which is, hey, can we build something that would be a great business, but also genuinely change it like nations
Mm.
and make like a GDP level impact.
Yeah. I love that. And when you got started, like that's the thing that really impressed me is that you were super methodical about how you got started, like in terms of like your age, your experiences until that point, and also your personal runway. So, which is like very much the opposite of many founder stories that you hear when they say, okay, just fuck it, we go all in. Like, could you talk about this thought process of yours of like just before you started Yonder?
I think that it's funny because like I have a high risk tolerance and a low risk tolerance at the same time. It's very weird. I have like an Asian upbringing, right? And so like you're taught with Asian upbringing is like make sure you have security, make sure you have financial safety net. There's like a bunch of things that's like ingrained in your psyche your entire life. So it's hard to like break that. But one of the things I think about now is this framework of where are the opportunities where there is capped downside, but
Mm.
uncapped upside. And I think the founder journey for me was pretty much uncapped upside, pretty limited downside. Like the worst case scenario is I get a job in another startup, or if I'm really desperate, I go back to consulting. Right? Like there's like I've got like a
Yeah.
ABCD, and if it goes really really bad, you know what? Like I'll go back and live with my parents back in Australia. Right? Like there was like a waterfall of like how bad things can get, and I'm like, you know what? Living with my parents isn't that bad.
Yeah.
That's my absolute worst case scenario. And so I kind of thought of through this lens of, but the upside is infinite. Like we could build something that has infinite upside. And I don't mean that just financially. I think
Mm.
infinite upside in terms of learning, fulfillment, building something we're proud of. And so I think about life through those lens now. Where is there like an uncapped upside but limited downside? And for most people who become a founder, they pretty much have like the most employable set of skills anyway. And so it doesn't really matter. Like
Yeah.
you'll be fine. And to an extent, there was an element of like there's a bit of an itch that I had to scratch,
Yeah.
and it definitely kind of felt like everything I did before that was like leading up to it. I don't know how to describe why I felt like that, but one of the few jobs where I feel like this is the perfect set of my skills, where I feel like I can be like top 1%
Mm.
in this area.
Yeah, and one other thing that you said is that you could actually run a startup like a large scientific experiment, so that if you start without distribution and without costs, that you could like ask the very initial question if people actually love the product. So yeah, could you talk about this approach of experimentation and how it helped you in the journey?
A lot of the way I think about it was being very systematic about like a P&L, which is like, as you go to the very top is like revenue, but how do you get revenue? You need customers. Customers times by ARPU is monetization, is like reaches monetization equals revenue. And then it's like marginal cost and then gross profit and then G&A and then all the way down. And actually I realized like as a startup, you basically just work your way through that down that list over like 10 or 15 year horizon. Like at the very start is like customer?
Mm.
Can you find customers? Then at some point, can you figure out how to way to monetize them? And then can you figure out a way how to like make sure that whenever you acquire a customer, you're not spending more money supporting them than you are making money from them, which is gross margin. And then it's like, can you get enough scale where you can cover the cost of running your business? And so like, I guess I kind of thought about a startup as like systematically going down that list all the way through. And like, we're now at the, scaling, optimized gross margin stage, but not worries too much still about G&A, just like scale, 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 scale. And so when we started, I was like, do not ignore everything, but just like focus on one thing, which is like find customers that love our product, and we will sticky tape everything. And so our original customer support was literally an iPhone that got passed around. And when you're on the overnight shift, you got given an iPhone that was literally would buzz at nighttime, and you would be woken up at 2 a.m. in the morning to do customer support. And that was like the most unscalable customer support. But we were like, I want to deliver this like memo experience. And so the way we do that is we're going to like sticky tape it together. It was an iPhone that we passed around. And so like we sort of like looked at, most things we would sticky tape. And then once we sort of figured out that it worked, then we would then move to the next thing, and move to the next thing, move to the next thing. And the reason why we did that is like partly because as a startup, there is like a limited throughput that you can do. Like you are genuinely capped on how much you can like execute on at any given moment. And so really great founders know how to sequence things, doing the right thing at the right time. And that's a really hard thing to do, which is like the sequencing side. Because I think there are too many problems to solve. Like every single startup is generally collectively on fire in multiple places. And so you kind of have to pick like which fire you put out at any given time. And so I think great founders know how to sequence which problem to solve next. And I think bad founders tend to just jump on every single fire that turns up. And then you kind of get no momentum at all.
Did the experiment scale with the size of the company as well? So when you talked about at the beginning, it was like a lot of sticky tape, and then how do you apply it now?
Let's call it like use screws when you have a level of confidence, but if you don't have confidence, then use like blue tack or sticky tape. So how do I think about that is things like international markets. So we're launching in Europe next year. Like that will be sticky taped together because like we will have very little confidence on how to do it. We will just be like figuring stuff out on the fly. And so by design, everything will be like literally like gaffer taped together. Like the entire business will be gaffer taped together in Europe because we really want to learn and we want to focus on, changing things and changing quickly. And so I think it's proportional to like which part of the business. So certain parts of our business is much more stable now. And so, yeah, we want to like make sure it actually works and scales. So I don't know, let's just take customer support now. Like it is not scalable now with our number of customers to have an iPhone being passed around now. Like we actually have to provide like scaled level of customer support. And so now we've got like a team in place and we're doing a lot more around like processes and all that. But a bunch of other stuff in our business is like, I don't know if it's going to work. Let's just try it out. And so that's like pure sticky tape. And so we want it to be as easy as to change as possible. And so I think that will change. Again, I think every startup will have to continue to define new product market fit. And so one of the things I always push our team to do is make sure we don't apply the structure that we apply to our mature part of our business to new parts. And so when we go and do Netherlands, like the team are like, well, we need all this headcount. I'm like, guys, we launched the entire company with 6 people. We do not need all this headcount. We need like, and others, the 6 people included engineering, right? So like, we really do not need that many people. We need 2 people. And then they're like, oh, but how's it going to work with like 10,000, 100,000 customers? I'm like, it doesn't need to work for 10,000, 100,000 customers. It needs to work for 100 customers. If you have 100 customers, call me and then we can figure out how to solve for 1,000 customers. Until then, leave me alone. You're going to get that. And so like trying to keep the sort of investment proportional to the confidence. And I think you kind of avoid the problem where you end up having too much investment in something. And then you have this like weird sunk cost fallacy and it becomes very hard to like get out as well. And, we saw that when I was my last scale up, I was part of the international expansion team and we launched into new markets and it gets tricky if you overinvest in the market. It's like hard to like get out of the market because you've already invested in a lot. And there was something that like I have a thesis, and I don't know if it's fully proven yet, but my thesis is that finding product market fit is almost like giving birth in the sense of you can't like fast track it. You can't just like push capital to find product market fit better. It takes kind of as long as it takes. So like you can't just like forced to make it faster.
Yeah.
And so I think certain things you can apply more capital and it makes it go faster, but certain other things applying more capital doesn't make it go faster.
Yeah. One other topic that you and we talked about earlier is, which is very much underrepresented in our industry, is the psychology of founders. And because I looked it up, like Sifted did a study last year and the results were really shocking. It said that every single founder they spoke to had mental health complaints. When you hear this statistic, what moment of your journey comes to your mind?
I mean, there's so many. I mean, we had Silicon Valley Bank. We just closed our Series A. I think we had 12 million pounds in the bank, and Silicon Valley Bank collapsed. And we were in another country doing a due diligence for a debt financing. So we were there, and the bank collapsed while we were on the plane there. Like, what were the chances of that happening? And caught up our investors, and it was pretty clear that they couldn't do anything. Like, they didn't have just cash lying around, and they had a bunch of portfolio companies that were impacted. I mean, there were literally hundreds of portfolio companies across the UK impacted across, and then if you add in the US, probably thousands as well. And I think that, the idea that your entire work could just go poof overnight for something out of your control is pretty devastating. Like, it's pretty full on. And, we spent we poured out sweat, blood, and tear. Closing a Series A wasn't easy. Like, all these things are like huge milestones. And all of a sudden, your entire company just goes poof overnight. And people are like, well, you should have had money in other accounts. Like, we did. We had money in other accounts. But how do you split 12 million pounds across many accounts? Like, we had 2 million in another account, but we can't run the business on 2 million pounds. I remember though, one night I just said, look, we've done everything we can. We've had our meeting with the board. We've done all our lobbying with the government through sort of the startup ecosystem in the UK. Let's just have a great dinner. And then literally
when you got the news.
yeah, I was like, let's just have a great dinner. And so we went out and had a really nice dinner. And we were just like, look, there's nothing we can do. We can't change it.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I've really been thinking a lot about is like, control the things you can control and let the score take care of itself. And what I mean by that is there's obviously a lot of rhetoric at the moment, which is like, are we in an AI bubble? And like, we probably are. The problem is like, we don't know when it's going to end. Like, the problem is the bubble could pop in like 4 years, and you could like over-index and be too conservative, or it could pop next week. Like, I don't know. I can't control that. And I remember talking to one of our board members about it, and he just said to me, he's like, look, control what you can control. And I think that's a really weird part of running a startup, because you obviously care deeply about what you're building. That's why you're a founder. And yet there are so many things that are still out of your control, despite feeling that you have control over many things. You could be doing a big enterprise SaaS deal, and all of a sudden your main sponsor leaves the company. The deal's dead. And like, you can't control that. Like, and all these little things that are outside of your control. And I think that the reality is basically shit happens to every startup. Like, and the last startup I was at, this is public, but ClearScore was getting acquired for 275 million pounds, which is a great exit within about 3 to 4 years of getting founded. And then the CMA, so the Competition Market Authority, decided to block the deal. And so it's pretty devastating. I wasn't directly impacted. I wasn't part of the early team, but that sucks. And that's not fair. A lot of great lawyers would have been engaged to tell you this deal would have been fine. And the ultimate outcome of the deal was it was blocked. And so then you have to kind of get back and continue. And we say it as like a passing comment, but imagine like 3-4 years of your work, you get this great exit opportunity. You're suddenly like, wow, this is an amazing, incredible outcome. And then a year later, nope, it's fallen through. Get back on it. It sometimes feels unfair. Actually, it often is unfair. But I think that when you kind of accept that that's just part of the journey, then it kind of makes it okay.
Yeah.
But we've definitely learned a lot, which is, on one hand, you have to be incredibly optimistic and hopeful, and on the other hand, be incredibly paranoid. Andy Grove wrote a great book called Only the Paranoid Survive, and I always tell like our management team, you need to be constantly paranoid. Like, I am so paranoid, and so this is weird like schizophrenia where you need to be super optimistic and yet really, really, really pessimistic and really, really paranoid, because you need to like, I'm always paranoid we're not working hard enough. I'm always paranoid we're not shipping fast enough. I'm always paranoid we're not going fast enough. Like, you want this sort of sense of dissatisfaction. And yet if you live in that for too long, you create like this cloud of sadness in the company. But if you're too overly optimistic, you can also create like a false sense of security as well. And you're not like looking around corners, you're not hustling, you're not pushing for the next inch. And so you kind of always want to be in this modality. And I always tell one of my co-founders, I don't think I'll ever feel like we're ever working hard enough. And yet at the same time, the team will always feel like we're working too hard. And like that tension will always inherently exist. And I've just sort of accepted it now.
So you mentioned focus only on the things that you can control. Are there any other practical advice or things that work for you personally to deal with this intensity? Because you mentioned it's not for like a year or two, it's like 10 years plus this journey.
And I think it's a different thing. I think for like a year or two is fine.
Yeah.
It's like the 5 to 10 year.
Yeah.
Like speak to founders who are doing it for 10 years, they're tired. Like it's very tiring.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, on a very practical level, I think the thing that we always say is you're running a marathon, not a sprint. And so you need to be quick, but you also need to be going for a distance. I think secondly, I think when you go in knowing it's going to be a long journey, it does change the way you make decisions. Like we went into this and we continue to have this posture of this will be a 10 to 20 year journey. This isn't going to be like a 4 or 5 year thing for us. This is like a 10 to 20 year journey. There's then other practical things like actually like find a support network, other founders, friends, community. In my case, like I have, a church community. I have like a great family and friends, and like actually make sure you don't lose them because
Yeah.
they are the first things to drop when you get busy. And yet, like when things don't go well, they're the ones that will look out for you when things don't go well. The highs and lows of it, of TechCrunch Sifted come and go. The same journalists that will say great things about you will say not so nice things about you. So like I'll say that stuff is fleeting and it will never last. But hopefully you've got like friends and community that will stick around. And then we also got a coach as well pretty early on, and we've been working with a coach since the start of the company. I remember things she said to me. She goes, "Tim, how do we help you find a really sustainable 50 to 60 hour work week?" It wasn't like 40, like it was like being realistic that this is going to be a lot of hours. But she's like, "Look, 70 to 80 you could probably do from time to time, but like the science probably shows that 70 to 80 continuously will probably burn you out. So let's go for like 55 to 60. Let's aim for sustainable 55 to 60." So she's like very realistic about what is involved in building a startup, but also like the key thing is sustainable. And so we did a lot of work together. So for example, I have a rule that I work all weekends, but I never work both weekends. So like I'll never work Saturday and Sunday. I'll work a Saturday or a Sunday. Um, I'll generally work most late evenings, but I always take Friday night off. Like stuff like that. And I found that that's just been a great way to continue to like push hard, but also just find something that's sustainable as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, personally, like I sometimes think of life also as a sequence of different trade-offs. So I'm wondering, like, what's like the highest price that you paid for building, especially like a fast scaling company?
I mean, I'm not around for my whole family is back in Australia. I'm not around for them. My parents are getting older. My co-founders, I mean, they've got kids, and one of them, his daughter actually did a family photo and didn't include him in it because he was working all the time. And that was like hard.
Yeah.
That's super hard to hear, to see something like that. So there's real cost. I don't think people talk about that, but that was a real cost of early years. And he's had to like readjust a little bit because he doesn't want to be completely absent dad as well. But he came to us and said, "Hey guys, like I need to go take my daughter to swimming classes." Like literally, she's like, "I'm not even in the family photo." And so I think that's a real sacrifice. I think that it's not a 9 to 5 job though, right? And so you're not going to get the same thing. I think that's a trade-off that all of us sort of have to accept, especially if you want to do it long term. If I want to have a family in the future and still want to keep doing this, there are real trade-offs there. I think people don't talk about that, I think, enough. I
Yeah,
think there are real trade-offs there. I think it's a trade-off that we're willing to make in this season of life. I wouldn't want to be an absent parent for the entire life, if that makes sense. And so I think there are like moments where you might choose to lean in more, lean out more. But I do think that there is a real trade-off there, and you can't deny that.
yeah. And one other thing you speak about is the personal transformations that you also go through, like while scaling the company, which is at the very beginning, you probably, you focus on building the product, and then you spend more and more time on building the team and ultimately the organization. Like, how did you experience these transformations for yourself?
One of the things that's very weird is that, at least for many founders, you end up becoming the CEO, but it doesn't actually mean you're like CEO material. It actually is. It's funny because being a founder and a CEO is actually a different job. We conflate them, but they're not the same job. Being a founder is building like the product and like trying to get something off the ground. Being a CEO is like running an organization. And oftentimes you are the same person, but the skills are very different. And so I had to learn the CEO job in addition to being the founder. And that was a whole new set of skills that I just don't have experience doing, right? Like I've never done it before. I was like middle management at a scale up, but I'd never been a CEO before. And so all of a sudden the team are coming to you with these like really obscure decisions you have to make. And you're like, I don't have any reference point on how to make that decision. And so I joke like my mind, the problem being the CEO as well is that basically all the decisions that come to you are only the hard ones. because all the easy ones are already done by your team. So by the time it comes to you, you only get the gnarly ones. And so it's like pretty fatiguing. And so, I got better at that. I think I got better at leading. I would say like I was probably like a B minus manager. I'd probably say I'm like maybe a B plus manager. I wouldn't say I'm excellent, but I think I'm better than I used to be. I think I'm a better leader than I used to be. I think the thing that I also didn't realize is that your job as a recruiter does not end. Like you will be a recruiter your entire career because as a founder and as a CEO, your job is to find the best talent. And that doesn't change because even when you're a unicorn doing 100 million run rate, you're still trying to find the best talent. And by the way, the talent you're going after is also getting approached by many other great people as well. So your job, like doing sales, essentially does not end.
Yeah.
It's easier that we can attract a better quality of talent, but yet the very best talent still are hard to get.
Yeah.
And so, for example, we recently recruited the guy who set up Starling Bank's customer service support. And he ran it for 7 years. And so, he was the right person we needed to help scale out customer support, and Starling had a great reputation. And so the second, my colleague, she was like, hey, I think we should really hire him. I'm like, let's get a train tomorrow. Let's go to Cardiff and get it and close him. Cool. And so literally like, we got on a train, we went over there, I had lunch with him and I said like, how do we get this over the line? And then by the end of it, he's like, yeah, I want to join. And I think, and he's created so much leverage for us, right? He's an incredible leader and he's really helped step change the business in that area of our business. And so I always say that it is my job to still close the best people in our company. And to their credit, some of our board members have said to me, if you need help closing great candidates, like let us help you as well. And that's like proper VC value add. Like there's a lot of bullcrap VC value add. And like one of the great VC value add is like, how do I help you close a candidate or help you close a deal?
Did you experience that it was actually helpful for you, like with VCs helping you close?
Yeah, I mean, for a couple of candidates, it was just a bit of an extra vote of confidence.
Yeah.
Like we don't negotiate on salary, but we're like, what we can do is give you a chance to meet one of our board members.
Yeah.
And actually, for a lot of people, they don't get a chance to meet a board member. So that's a pretty unique opportunity. And they can also hear why that investor invested in the first place as well. And that's always a bit of an extra angle as well. But I think that this isn't unique to, companies even our size. I mean, you hear about Mark Zuckerberg going out and like recruiting the best talent. I think that's true. I think the fact that the best leaders have to go and really seek out the best talent, and that's how you create leverage.
Yeah. And you mentioned that, so those different stages require different skills, but I think they also nearly require different characteristics. I'm wondering, like, how did you personally had to transform to actually fit to those different roles?
I think to an extent that I think at the early stage, you can put your arms around everything and you know exactly what's going on every part of it. Like, if you're like, pre-seed, super early stage company, you pretty much know how everything is working in your company, like ins and out. We're not even that big, but even now, like, I don't know what my team are doing every single day of the week. Like, there's just too many people now to know what happens. And so you start to get better at knowing what do you need to put in place to know things are going well versus not well, but also how do you know when people are lying to you?
Yeah.
When I say lying to you, not because people are bad, but because people want to tell you good news. And so you kind of get much better at like sniffing out, is there a problem there? I don't need to go deep. I think that the bad advice for VCs is when you get to, I don't know, the scaling phase, let's call it 10 million run rate plus whatever. You need to hire your management team, empower them, leave them alone. It's actually like really terrible advice because I think the thing that's unique about the founder / CEO is that you still have perspective of the entire company that no one else has. Like you have a unique set of perspectives. And also you have a sense of like attention to detail that no one else has as well. So the way I think about it is my job is I just guys like create leverage where I can, which is I put in this input, but I get like a much larger output somewhere else. And then there are certain parts of the business that need attention and I should go really deep on there. And if we're a consumer product business, it's basically like product and distribution are like the two most important things. And so I should stay very, 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 very close to it all the time.
Yeah.
Like I never not get close to it. And I've told my head of product and my head of marketing, like, look, I will not leave you alone. It's like, I'm sorry, but product and distribution is what makes our business. So I will always stay close to the part of the business. The other parts of their business, I will generally hire, empower, and only get close when they need help.
Yeah.
And so I've tried to be quite particular on when I'm really close to the detail versus when I'm not. So that's probably the evolution. Whereas in the past, maybe I could be close to everything and you just can't do that anymore.
Tim, we have a closing tradition on this podcast, which is like something I ask all guests, which is if you could challenge like our listeners to do one thing this week, and they could be like whether they are founders, professionals, students, or operators, to get them like a step closer to their goal, what would that be?
I would say try something you never thought you would have tried. So I heard this thing: as I get older, the less I'm willing to try new things, and I say it as in it's slightly embarrassing, but I had a friend's birthday over the weekend, and she volunteered us all to do Vogue dancing, which is slightly embarrassing. But I was very much like, I'm just going to say yes.
Yeah.
And I think what I want to try and maintain is a sense of like curiosity, and hopefully that will then maintain curiosity in every other part
Yeah.
of what I do as well. Because I think that once I lose that curiosity, I think I'll lose my edge as a founder.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Tim. I think you're a very rare combination of like things that usually don't really happen to meet each other very often, which is like on one hand there's intensity and like a fast moving pace that you have, but also at the other side, like you're very empathetic and considerate. So, and I think like both sides we saw in the conversation. So thank you so much.
Appreciate it.